My superpower growing up as a kid was being invisible, because when you feel like you're broken, you don't want to stand out. You don't want the attention. You don't want the spotlight. I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And I said, I can't read all this. I have schoolwork. And he looks at me when I say schoolwork. He said, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. I really wanted to solve this riddle about how does my brain work so I could work my brain. And I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. It's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart.
Hello and welcome to Unstoppable. I'm your host, Kerwin, and today we get fast. Fast is slow and slow is fast, but how good would it be if you could read at 10 times the speed you read at right now, and not only read 10 times faster, but remember 10 times more? Well, today is the day where you're going to get some insights into how that is possible with world-renowned expert Jim Kwik, who is a speed reading, memory improvement, and brain performance authority with over 25 years experience in teaching. He is sought by celebrities all over the world, such as John Travolta, Tony Robbins, Simon Sinek, and even Will Smith. Jim Kwik will transform the way you think, learn, live, and in this episode of Unstoppable, we find out about why and how Jim actually got onto the path that he's on and what got him to where he is today as one of the world's foremost experts on speed reading and performance learning. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Kwik, listen up. This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way. And we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology. We're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com.
Good.
The brain.
Hey.
How are you, mate? Good to see you. Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Oh, mate, there's more. Yeah, let's show the team show you around.
Amazing.
We have all superpowers catered for.
Yeah.
Your content, like you're really touching a nerve, and I don't mean that, and there's no pun intended.
Right.
But with the brain, like because I'm assuming there's a lot of people that have had brain injury that have benefited as a result of your help. So I can imagine some of these stories could be quite significant. They're not just, oh, wow, you helped me remember, you know, the list of ingredients to go to the shop, or you helped me remember ones and lessons. Like some people, you're actually helping them actually, reintegrate into life in some respects, I'd imagine.
I get a lot of comments for people. Yes, we have the people that I'm so happy I read faster, or my memory and remembering names. But the ones that really shake you, the most of them are actually an identity shift, where people feel like at some point in their life, they felt like they were broken, or they felt like they were stupid. They felt like they were labeled and they were limited. And to liberate people from limitation, to be unstoppable. And I feel like we're kindred spirits in that respect, helping people transcend, really end that trance, whatever those limiting beliefs came from. Because it's interesting, because when we're born, we're a blank slate, right? And somehow those things got imprinted on us.
Your brand's at a level now where, being an introvert, I'm going to assume that brings up interesting stuff for you in the public space. Is that a fair statement or a fair assumption?
It is. And I'm introverted, and I'm also shy on top of it, because when I had this accident when I was 5, this brain injury, it was in kindergarten class.
So I've always been curious about this injury. Like, I've heard it talked about, but I've never actually understood what it was. What actually happened?
Yes. So we were in kindergarten, which is when we're about 5 years old, for schooling. And one day there's all this commotion outside of the building of the school, and there were all these fire trucks. And for me, firefighters were these superheroes. Yeah. I always, who doesn't love superheroes when you're growing up? But down my block was the firehouse, and I always saw these individuals. They're so brave that they go into danger when most people are trying to flee it, right? Anyway, there's sirens outside, and everyone's going up to look, and we're so tiny, right? Because we're 5 years old, we can't see outside the window. So everyone grabs their chair, and they from their desk and they put it by the windowsill and they climb up and they look at the firefighters, see what's going on outside. And when I'm doing that, one of the other students pulled the chair from underneath me and just so that they could use it, you know, and I go head first right into this radiator. And, you know, and there's blood and there's not a lot of memories around it, but my parents, you know, I was obviously rushed to the hospital. My parents said I was never the same. My personality changed. It's just, you know, I had this long streak of labels and learning challenges and bad focus.
So what age was that?
I was 5 years old.
5 years old. And are you still conscious of the labels that started to get used like post accident?
Completely. Because, you know, at the age of 9, a teacher pointed to me in front of the whole class and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain."
Right.
And that's where I kind of took that. And adults have to be very careful with their external words because your external words become a child's internal words.
Becomes their dialogue.
That became
a little voice.
Exactly. So every time I did badly on a test, a quiz, an exam, I would always say, "Oh, because I have the broken brain." Or if I wasn't picked for football or, you know, team
that
sports,
was the theme song.
I would just, I'm the broken one. And so I talk about superpowers and superheroes a lot because I couldn't read when I was a kid for a few years because my brain injury. It took me longer, and I taught myself how to read by reading comic books.
That's so interesting.
And something about the themes, good versus evil, you know, one person can make a difference, hope, help.
What age was it when you started getting into the comic books?
That's how I learned how to read. So it was about 8 years old, 8, 9.
And what was the first character that really took your imagination and it was like, ooh, because it sounds like it was something that you were interested in that gave you a set of skills. Like
it did.
You're interested in the comics. Who was the first character that grabbed your imagination?
So my favorite characters growing up were the X-Men team.
Oh yeah, nice.
You know, so I love Wolverine and Professor X. And it was interesting because I mentioned this at your event, one of the defining moments was when I was reading, I found out that the school, and the reason why the X-Men were so, they're not the strongest, but for me, they were my favorite because they didn't fit in. They are mutants and they were marginalized and people didn't understand them. And I felt like for me, growing up with these learning issues, I felt like I was labeled and kind of a mutant myself. But the cool thing was when I was reading the comic books, I found out that their school, they actually have an actual academy where they train their X-Men to discover and develop their superpowers. Was in Westchester, New York, and that's where I grew up.
Wow.
So
there's all this serendipity.
There is a lot of serendipity here.
I got to get chosen at some point.
Exactly. So at the age of 9, I'm actually riding my bicycle like almost every weekend, trying to find the school for the gifted, because I wanted to find my superpowers. I wanted to find my super friends, if you will, because my superpower growing up as a kid was going back to being an introvert, was being invisible. Because when you feel like you're broken, you don't want to stand out. You don't want the attention. You don't want the spotlight. I would be invisible, and I could feel my body even thinking about just trying to shrink in just because you don't want to get called on in class because you don't have the answer. It's like even when that book was passed around, when they're first teaching you how to read, everyone gets really nervous. And I actually think, Kerwin, that's why people are afraid of public speaking, because a big part of it came from when we first learned how to read. We would pass around that book and you had to read out loud, public speak. But of course, you're not great at it the first time. So, people get so nervous and have so much anxiety around that, be able to perform when you're not great at something. So for me, when the book came to me, I would just stare at the words. They didn't mean anything. I would just pass it on. And it was just really, really challenging. I remember there was a time where I was failing out of high school English, and they called my parents in, and the teacher said, "Hey, for extra credit, you could do this book report on Albert Einstein and a little bit about Da Vinci, about genius, right?" And I agreed to do it, and I'm in the library for weeks and weeks and weeks after school, and I even had this book report professionally bound, and I was so excited to turn it in because I put my heart and soul into it, and it represented like my potential, right? And the day it was due, the teacher has their class, and at the end of class, she says, "I have a surprise for you, everybody. Jim, come up, in front of the class and give a talk on your book report. And I didn't know I had to give a speech on it. And so I freaked out. I was so nervous. I actually lied and said I didn't do it. And you could see the disappointment in her eyes. And when the class left, I would take the book report. I took it and put it right in the trash.
Wow. How old was that?
This was in high school.
I was in high school.
So it was like I was also throwing out metaphorically my power or my potential. And but I was so nervous about public speaking. And it's kind of interesting. My two biggest struggles growing up as a child were learning and public speaking. And that's all the universe has a sense of humor, because that's all I do for a living. Travel the world, public speaking on this thing called Learning.
So at what point did you start to work out how to learn? Because one of the reasons I love you so much is I can relate to your story. And I don't know how much you know about my story, but I got a couple of brain injuries. But even before I had the brain injuries, at the age of 7 or 8, I was diagnosed as learning disabled. Dyslexic, ADHD, because I was very hard to control. I found it took me longer to learn. And I never actually read a book until the age of 23. And then since 23, I developed this passion to go, shit, I want to learn how to learn. And that's when I started off with the original, like the Tony Buzan stuff,
right?
Back in the day before I actually stumbled across your stuff. And so there was a point, I remember this point in my life where I picked up the book. It was the first book I read that I remembered. It was called The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz. And I remember reading it and finishing it in like 2 days. And first of all, I was like, fuck, I finished the book. And second, I was like, wow, I can actually remember what I read. And I remember that was the defining moment where I was like, maybe I'm not stupid, because I'd been given that broken brain, like that stupid label. And that to me was like a moment in time. I still remembered. I was at the back in a storeroom of a sports store that I was managing at the time, finished the book, and I had that thought, fuck, maybe I'm not stupid after all. And then I started to pursue the learning. I'm curious, did you have one of those moments where all of a sudden you went, maybe I don't have a broken brain. Maybe I am a fucking genius. Like, do you remember that?
I do. It wasn't an actual moment, but it was it was a series of them. But when I was 18, I was lucky to get into a university because I honestly didn't have the grades for it. And as a freshman, I thought freshman meant I could make a fresh start because
I'm a freshman.
Right, exactly. And I purposely picked a school that I didn't know anybody was going to, because I realized at that age, even at 18, that we tend to try to fit ourselves in a box that people, and the box is made up of other people's opinions and their expectations of you. And so I picked a school that people didn't know who I was, so I could make a fresh start, and took all these classes and with the hopes of doing better, but I actually do worse because, university is a lot harder than high school. And I was ready to quit. Because my parents, they immigrated to the United States. We had the typical story. I mean, we didn't have any money, didn't have any education, didn't have contacts. We lived in the back of a laundromat that my mother worked at. I mean, wow. it was a challenge. And so,
where are you originally from?
So they came from China.
Yeah, right.
And so it's one of those things where it's not about resources externally. It's more about this resourcefulness that we have internally. And but they didn't have the money. And for me to be in school, and I'm the oldest of 3 children, I wanted to be a good example for my younger siblings, and I was doing worse. So I had all this pressure, but school wasn't very rewarding for in terms of the results I was getting. So I was ready to quit, and I didn't know how to tell my folks and disappoint them. And I had all this stress, and a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you take the weekend off? I'm going to go home for the weekend. Why don't you come with me and get some perspective? And I really do believe perspective is very important when it comes to our life. Usual change of place or a change of people that you spend time with can change your point of view, and it helps you to get out of yourself and think in a different way. And so I agreed to go for the weekend, and the family is pretty well off, very different than the way I grew up. And the father's walking me around his property before dinner and asked me a very innocent question, which is the worst question you could ask me at that time, is, how's school? And I as introverted as I am, I just break down emotionally right in front of this stranger.
Wow.
And I tell him my whole story: brain injury, boy with a broken brain, learning challenge, tell these labels, and school's not for me. and I don't know how to, I got to quit because we don't have the money for me to be going to school. And he's like, Jim, and he asked me another question. He said, Jim, why are you in school? I'm like, what do you want to be, do, have, share? And I honestly did not have an answer because nobody's ever asked me that question before. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? I just assumed everyone just goes to school, right, to get a job or whatever. And I go to answer him, and he says, stop. And he pulls out of a journal out of his back pocket and tears out a couple of sheets and makes me write it down, which is interesting because I never wrote down goals or dreams, but it's a success principle, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm done, I have a couple of pages of just free-flowing ideas of what I imagine a great life would be. And I fold the sheets of paper to put in my pocket because I thought the exercise was done. And he reaches out and he grabs them right out of my hand. And now you have this stranger who's going through my deepest dreams and goals, which I've never shared with anybody, maybe even with myself because I didn't think about them. And he's just reading them. And it's very intimidating, right? You're this 18-year-old kid who doesn't know anything, and there's somebody in front of you who's obviously very successful and just looking at your biggest dreams. And when he's done, he looks up and he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on that list. And he spreads his index fingers about a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way, give me 10 lifetimes. I'm not going to crack that list. And he takes his fingers and he puts them to the side of my head, meaning that what's in between my brain is the key. And he takes me into a room of his home that I've never seen before. You would love it. It was wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books.
Oh my God.
And I've never seen a library in somebody's home before. Wow. And remember, I've never read a book cover to cover at this time either. And I'm 18 years old and I'm not a good reader.
Yeah.
And it's like being in a room full of snakes. If you're afraid of snakes, it's like very intimidating. And what makes it worse is he starts going to the shelves and grabbing snakes and handing them to me. And I'm looking at these titles, and there are these incredible biographies of women and men in history and some very early personal growth books, the ones that you've read. You know, The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale, Napoleon Hill, How to Win Friends and Influence People, all the classics, right? Psycho-cybernetics.
So I was just about to say psycho-cybernetics.
Right, all the classics. Yeah. And he's like, I'm holding all these books in a pile in my arms, and he says, Jim, I want you to read one book a week. And I'm thinking, have you not heard my story? And I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And I'm arguing for how stupid I am and how, challenged I am. And I'm defending my challenges, right? And I said, I can't read all this. I have schoolwork. And he looks at me when I say schoolwork. He said, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I didn't realize it was a Mark Twain quote because this is more than 25 years ago. And I was like, that's very insightful.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I can't commit to doing that because the way how I was raised, it was one of those things where my family they're not the most health conscious or the most well off financially or the most educated. They're just really good people. They do what they say they're going to do, and they work very hard, and they're kind. And I said, I can't commit to reading all these books because if I do, I'm going to do it, and I'm not capable of doing that. And very smart man, he reaches into his pocket and he takes out my dreams, my bucket list, which he still has, and he starts to read every single one of my goals out loud. And something, Kerwin, about hearing your deepest dreams, your biggest dreams, out of somebody else's voice, like sent out into the universe, it messed with my mind and my heart, my spirit, something fierce, honestly. And on that list, a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my parents, for my family, things that they couldn't afford to do for themselves, or even if they could, they wouldn't do those kind of things. And that also leads me to, in terms of, we talked about the power of perspective, we talked about the power of questions to help us be unstoppable. And then what other thing that makes you unstoppable is having a reason. Because I believe reasons reap rewards, reasons reap results. And here was a list of my reasons, things I wanted to do for the people I cared about. And I offer this to everyone who's listening. It's like we all have things that we're putting off or things that we know we should do, but we procrastinate or we sabotage. And one of the things that could help you get out of that is a different perspective, like for me. Also getting around different people. Also for me, different questions, because like, here's a question. Who's counting on you right now to be unstoppable? Who's counting on you right now to be on your A game, in your life? And for me, it was my family. And so with that leverage and that motivation, understanding my purpose, as Simon Sinek talks about, start with why, I had my reasons that he was reading out to me, and I agreed to read one book a week. And so now fast forward, I'm at school and I'm sitting at my desk, I have a pile of books I have to read for school and a pile of books I promised to read. And I really couldn't get through pile A, right? And so how do I get through pile B and A? I don't eat, I don't sleep.
This is before audiobooks, by the way, as well.
Exactly. So I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't spend time with friends, all the things that we know are good for you. I just live in the library, and I'm wasting away, and a few, weeks and months of this, I end up passing out of sheer exhaustion in the library. I fell down a flight of stairs. I hit my head again.
Oh, shit.
And I woke up 2 days later in the hospital.
Wow.
And at this point, I thought I died. And maybe part of me wished I did. It was the darkest time in my life.
Right.
And I was wasting away. I was down to 117 pounds.
Wow.
So I lost all this weight, and I was hooked up to all these IVs, and I thought there has to be a better way. And when I had that thought, the nurse came in with a mug of tea, and on it was a picture of Albert Einstein, which is so strange because that was like what I spent months doing a book report on, right, on his life. And the words he was speaking to me, it was a quote on the mug that said, you've heard this quote in some form, "The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. The same level of thinking that's created our problem won't solve it." And it made me ask a new question, like, how do I think differently about this problem? I was like, well, what's my problem? My problem is I'm a very slow learner. And then I was thinking, how do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to learn faster. And you ask a new question, you get a different answer. And my first answer was, I could learn it from school. So I asked the nurse to bring me a course bulletin with all the classes for next semester. And she did. And I'm flipping through it, pages of looking at classes I could take. And they're all classes on what to learn, but not how to learn. I realized that when people see me at events like yours, and I do these demonstrations where I have people stand up and I memorize the first few rows of names, or they give me 100 words or 100 numbers, I always tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's possible. Because the truth is, everyone who's listening to this could do that and a lot more. You could be getting up each morning and turning your brain on. You could get through your to-do list. You could, get that raise. You can meet that ideal person. But we have these limits that we don't realize that we have, that have been printed on us. And, this is really about transcending. It's about ending the trance, this mass hypnosis, these lies that we've been told. It's a process of, I call it unlimiting. Where it's, we are limitless, but we have to go through a process of unlimiting ourselves. It's like a verb, constantly unlearning bad habits.
Constantly removing the speed limiter.
Exactly. Yeah. Very much so. And so when I got out of that hospital bed, I devote my studies, and not for school, but in learning how to learn. I really wanted to solve this riddle about, how does my brain work so I could work my brain? How does memory work so I could work my memory? And I started studying adult learning theory and psychology, and I started studying things like brain science and ancient memory techniques. Like, what did people do before there was books, printing presses or smart devices, right? Or Audible. What did people do? How did they remember information, pass on information? And so I started studying ancient mnemonics. Like, what did the ancient Greeks do thousands of years ago? What did, ancient native indigenous tribes do to hold on to information and pass on history through generations without external technology to be able to do that? And I started studying all these things, and about 60 days into it, a light switch just turned on, and I started to understand things for the first time.
Wow.
I remember the incident. It was I was in class, and it was a lecture center of, and I never talk about this, but it was a few hundred people in a lecture center, and they used to have these slides before the internet. They would have these these slide projectors, and the professor put something up on there, and about 15 seconds into it, I start laughing, and I'm always shrinking down in class, not getting, and I don't want to be called on or anything, and everyone turns around. 300 people just turn around and look, my direction, because I was laughing out loud, and about 30 more seconds into it, there was a ripple of laughter throughout the lecture center. And we were all reading what was on the screen because it was that humor to it. But I guess I had read it super fast because I had, unfolded and developed these superpowers. And the reason why I'm doing it today is because I couldn't help but help other people.
Yeah.
And because I was really angry that I struggled for a decade and a half, thinking I was a loser, thinking I wasn't smart, thinking I had no potential or personal worth, when there were simple things that we could have done to be able to activate those parts of our brain that I wasn't. I realized that it's not about how smart you are. Some of you listening are asking yourself how smart you are, how smart your kids are, how smart your team is. It's not how smart you are. It's how are you smart? It's not how smart you are. It's how are you smart? Because we all have genius. But
we all have our own superpower.
We do.
It's just uncovering it and learning how to express it. One of the superpowers that I've seen you do incredibly well is actually build a business off the back of your memory. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in a way of absolute admiration, because the realms in which you've been able to take your technology kind of far go beyond the everyday of, I just want to learn how to, read faster. I just want to learn how to remember everyone's names. You now play at the level. It's like, dude, I got to remember. I'm in this fucking $100 million blockbuster. I've got to remember these lines. Right. Can you help me out? I'm curious how you went from the transition of, okay, I now the lights go on. I now know how to learn. You know what? I actually love this so much. This is gonna be a business.
Okay.
And not just a business. Now I can say the likes of Will Smith and, are now my clients. The X-Men, you end up going and working with all the X-Men, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. I would, okay, so when I was 18, I learned these superpowers, and I discovered and developed them, and I realized other people I was tutoring, helping my friends. I had lost all this weight, and I couldn't afford to eat.
So you were tutoring your friends now?
Well, just as because I couldn't help but when you're struggling this whole time,
and then you get the keys,
you don't want other people to suffer. Yeah, so I started just for free, helping my friends out, and they would at night order all this food because the food on campus was really bad. And here's me who has lost all this weight. I couldn't afford to eat, because I didn't have any money. And a friend was like, hey, why don't you tutor other people like you're tutoring us? Just charge them for it. And I was like, that's great. That's a great value add. And so I found a classroom that wasn't being used one Thursday night. And I said, okay, next week I'm going to put 5 or 10 people in that room. And maybe after I teach them some things for free, maybe 1 or 2 of them want to learn and be tutored by me. So I go back and I take a piece of paper and I scribble down. It's my first marketing ever. It was free speed reading, memory tips, get better grades in less time, and Thursday night, 7:00 in the classroom, right?
Beautiful. How old are you at this point? You're like 19?
18.
18
late 18, going on 19. And I make a bunch of photocopies the next morning on the way to class. I put some up on the bulletin boards, not a lot, but just around campus. Fast forward to Thursday. I'm walking to the classroom and I'm just hoping, Kerwin, just 5 people show up, just 5.
And there's a line at the door.
And I turn the corner and there is that line out of the door. There's a crowd of people. But here's the thing, you only see what you believe is there.
Yeah.
So I thought, wow, I hope whatever's going on ends soon so I could do my thing, right? And
I love you,
and because you can't see what it's always like this phrase. It's people always say, "Well, I'll believe it when I see it," but maybe it's that Wayne Dyer idea where you'll see it when you actually believe it. So I didn't see it because I didn't believe it. And there's this guy, tall guy. I remember in the doorway. I couldn't get in. I was like tapping on his shoulder, what's going on inside? He's like, he looked at me. He was like, there's a speed reading class. And honest to God, I go, wow, what a coincidence. What are the odds? What are the odds? The same night, the same room, there's another speed reading class. And I pushed my way in, and the room's crowded, standing room only. And lo and behold, nobody's teaching. And it takes my slow brain all that time to realize why they're all there. And I do a head count, and instead of 5 or 10 people, there's 110 people.
Wow.
And keep in mind, I'm 18 years old.
Yeah.
I look really young. I'm lost all this weight. I have like t-shirt and shorts on. I'd have nothing prepared to talk about. There's teaching assistants, graduate students, a lot of people who are older and more experienced than me. And remember, I'm the guy that walked out of that book report and threw out the book. Like, I'm phobic of public speaking. Like, a lot of people are a little, nervous,
You
but
were
like
phobic.
is like you can't breathe. Like when somebody's phobic of those snakes, or like they can't
function.
They can't at all. And so I can't even breathe, and I go in fight or flight, and I flight. I leave.
Oh, wow.
Because I can't. I would love to say like, oh, it was amazing, and standing ovation.
This is
and
better.
No. So I leave because I don't believe in myself, and I just can't. I've never done it before, and I can't even go back to my dorm room because my friends are just gonna make fun of me in my mind, and so I go to these fountains, and water brings me back center. I don't know what it is about that element, but it always kind of relaxes me. And I'm like doing this meditation, and I don't even realize I'm doing this walking meditation back to my room, my dorm room, and I hear this voice inside my head, and it's my mother's voice. And I won't tell you exactly what she said, but essentially it was 100 people came out because you promised to help them. You're disappointing them, you're disappointing me. And and I don't want to disappoint my family. So I actually take one step back to the classroom. And it's so interesting that one step in another direction completely changes your destination or your destiny. And I think everyone can relate to this. One step, like who you're going to be with, or where you're going to live, or what are you going to do as for a career. It changes everything. And so I go back to the classroom and I speak for 2 hours. I teach, and I honestly don't know anything I spoke about. It just, I don't know how you are on stage. Sometimes it just flows.
Channels.
Yeah, it just channels right through. And Wayne Dyer was the same. I got to spend a lot of time with him speaking at events, and he would never prepare. He would just go out there and trust that and be a vessel for it, and that he did the work, right? And so I don't remember what I said, but afterwards I come out of this trance and I'm like, okay, well, if anyone's interested in what I just said, I need about 10 hours to teach you what I've learned, maybe 2 hours a week for the next 5 weeks. If you're interested, I get $30 an hour, because that's what I got teaching tennis back back when I was a teenager. I'll be in the student center tomorrow at noon if you're interested and have any questions. And honestly, it's so crazy. Everyone just got up and they left. Nobody came to talk to me or anything. And I'm completely confused. And when I'm there by myself, I kind of like in that classroom when everyone left and I didn't do the book report, I threw it out. I was so confused and I was so exhausted at the same time. I ended up falling asleep right on the carpet in that classroom because I'm mentally, emotionally, I'm spent. You ever had like this thing that you've always struggled with, and you do it and you feel so depleted and energized at the same time? I had the best night of my sleep in my life, and I got woken up by the classroom coming into the morning session.
Wow, you slept all night.
All night. And I look up drooling on myself, and I see all these people staring at me, and I run to my dorm room, take a shower, go to breakfast, go to class. 12 o'clock comes. I was like, oh, I told people I'd be in the student center, and I run to the student center a few minutes late. And I hope one person just thought enough of me that they'd be interested in going further. And when I get there, that same crowd of people were there. And at the end of 2 hours, 71 out of 100 kids signed up for a program that didn't even exist.
Wow.
Because I didn't at $300 US dollars a person, because I didn't even do the math that $30 an hour times 10 hours was $300. And I didn't realize that kids had... students had this card, ATM card, that they could go to the bank and just, this machine, take out $300, because I didn't have one.
Yeah,
right. And so now I'm not even 19 years old and I have like $21,000 cash in my pocket, my book bag, right? And I've never seen like anything like that, anything close to that in my life. And I go back to my mentor, his words, saying, don't let school get in the way of your education. Yeah. And I use that money to feed my body because I was so underweight and I could get pizza and chicken and broccoli and everything. But I used all of it really to feed my mind. And I buy every, I'm gonna date myself, every audio cassette, every book. I travel around the country and the world learning how to learn. And I make that my profession. But the reason I'm doing it today is because one of those 71 students she was a freshman. She read 30 books in 30 days. Which is, imagine, I mean, and when I teach reading, it's not skimming or skipping words or getting the gist. I mean, I teach notables, leaders of countries. I teach CEOs, doctors, world-class
How long does it take
attorneys.
you, like when you get like parachuted in to work with a Nobel, a world leader, or a Will Smith? Like, do you have like, okay, guys, I can work with you 2 hours, I can work with you 8 hours, or if you really want me to fucking revamp your brain, we're going to need 2 weeks or 6 weeks?
It does.
Yeah.
All the above, because everybody has different needs. Like even the people that you coach, they have different needs for their or desires, dreams for their brand, for their business, for their bank account, for themselves. So I customize it around their time, their resources, my time, resources. Being in one place is still difficult, but I get those calls like right in the moments where, whether it's people are people come to me, they're either struggling and suffering, or they're on the other side of the spectrum. They're extremely successful, but they just want that edge, and they want to main that exactly that mental advantage.
This is where you're actually becoming more popular now, and I'm seeing it less around memory and more around performance. Would that be a fair assumption?
It is. I mean, my wheelhouse is in accelerated learning. So anything people want to learn faster,
which is performance,
is exactly because I think that learning is in a way the grandmother or grandfather of personal growth and performance. Because if there was a genie here, and let's say this genie would grant you one wish, everyone would wish for millions of wishes, right? Endless wishes. But if I was a learning genie and I could grant you one wish to learn anything better and faster, what would you wish for? What would the equivalent be of endless millions of wishes? The equivalent would be wishing, learning how to learn. Because if you can learn how to learn quickly, you could apply that towards your goals. Anything, Mandarin, martial arts, marketing, music, anything that you're excited about, and it
really
makes everything
matrix.
Exactly.
It's like you're now downloading information, downloading skills, downloading knowledge.
Exactly, and everybody has that potential, regardless of your age, your background, your career, your education level, your financial situation, your gender, your history, your IQ. That doesn't matter. What matters is having the motivation. Because that's not something you could give to somebody, right? Because you could teach somebody all the techniques, but if they're not motivated or driven, they're not, have some kind of purpose, they're not going to do it. Because knowledge is not power. It's the greatest lie, that we all tell ourselves, is that knowledge is power. But it's knowledge times action equals power. Because all the podcasts, online programs, coaching, conferences, none of it works unless we work, right? And so all the books that's sitting on your shelf, it's more shelf-help than self-help unless we're actually learning it and applying it all the time. But the other thing we can't give somebody besides motivation is an open mind. Because if somebody can be motivated, but they're not open to learning new things, because a lot of what I need to do is, as I'm sure you do as well, is helping people unlearn bad habits that they picked up or bad practices in their businesses or in their productivity, things that we have to unlearn. If you're not open to it, it's not going to happen. But this young lady read 30 books in 30 days. Wow. I found out that her motivation, going back to her drive, was her mother. That her mother was dying of terminal cancer, was only given 2 months, 60 days to live. And that's what doctors said. And the books she was reading were books on health and wellness. She wanted to save her mother's life. Right. And I wished her luck, prayers, everything.
Wow.
6 months later, I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying and she's crying and crying. And when she stops, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why. The doctors all called it a miracle, but her mother attributed it 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter,
Wow.
who learned it for all these books. In that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. And it's a superpower we all have access to. And so, that is what put me on that path of, for this mission of leaving no brain left behind is my mission. And eventually I started doing it at all these universities in the States, everywhere from Caltech to Harvard. And these kids start doing so well that their parents took note and asked them how and why. And they found out about my teachings. And these adults, their parents worked in law firms and insurance companies and corporate America. And so I started to work there. But every opportunity to scale, I didn't do it because of I'm introverted, and I didn't wanted to be that, that person
out there.
Yeah, because I value my harmony and some sort of semblance of balance. And so how I did it was through corporate America, but every book deal, media, franchising, learning centers, trainers, I didn't do because I wanted to keep it close. But then I had an incident years ago where I almost died in another accident, and it made me think about legacy. Yeah. The things you talk about, like what, I felt like shame on me if there's something I could do that could help somebody and who's struggling or suffering the way I did, and I didn't do it. And I feel I do it for, really out of a moral obligation, because it's not comfortable. Even here in Australia, I'm going to be on stage, 14,000 people. And it's not comfortable for me ever. Honestly, 14 people is not super comfortable for me.
Yep.
But I put my attention towards them, and that's how I get over those kind of.
Do you still remember getting the first phone call from a studio where there was a superhero attached to it, and you're like,
It was.
holy shit.
Yeah,
I'm now.
I remember exactly. In 2013, I get a call from the chairman of 20th Century Fox, which is a huge film studio in the States. And when I'm walking and doing their training on a Friday, I remember I was in such a good mood because the movie posters really going into their boardroom, it was like Avatar and Star Wars and Alien, it was all these amazing,
good stuff.
yeah. And it put me in this childlike state. And I think that part of our greatness comes when we're a little bit more playful and we try to bring joy to things. And I don't think we stop playing because we grew older. I think we grew older because we stopped playing. And children are such, they learn so fast. And part of it is they're willing to make mistakes and play. So it put me in this state, and I gave my best training. And afterwards, the chairman was like, this was the best coaching training we've ever done. Thank you so much. And he gives me a tour of the Fox lot, the 20th, the film lot. And I've never been on a film lot before. And I saw this movie poster of it's Hugh Jackman.
Wolverine.
Yeah. And it was the movie coming out. It wasn't coming out for a few months. But I was like, wow, I can't wait for that. I just happened to say, I can't wait for that movie to come out. And he picks up the phone. And 5 minutes later, I'm sitting in his theater with 3D glasses watching Hugh Jackman fight all these super ninjas, and it was amazing. And it was the best Friday afternoon ever. And afterwards, he was like, how was the movie? And I was like, this is incredible. This is even better than the other one. And thank you so much. And I tell him my whole story about not being able to read and my broken brain. And my favorite comic books, I tell him, were the X-Men, because they didn't fit in like I didn't fit in, like Wolverine and everybody. And I told them that you don't know this, but I grew up in Westchester, New York, where the X-Men school in the comic books resided. And I used to ride my bicycle. I just posted this picture on Instagram today. I used to ride my bicycle all over my neighborhood trying to find that school, because I wanted to find my superpowers and my super friends. He's like, Jim, I didn't know you like superheroes. Do you want to go on set of the filming the new X-Men movie? We have 30 days left in Montreal, and we're in LA, obviously. And I'm like, yeah, I've never been on a set. Thank you. What can I do for you? He's like, do the same thing you did for us, for them. Teach them how to speed read their scripts, teach them to memorize their lines faster, teach them to be focused, on camera. And I said, I could totally do that. So the next morning we get on what they call the X-Jet. And when I get on, the entire cast of X-Men's on the jet. And I don't even see Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. I see like Wolverine, I see Professor X, and I'm sitting between Jennifer Lawrence and Halle Berry going to Montreal. And the first scene that they shot, I get choked up thinking about it, took place in the school. And the school I've always been looking for, right? And it's something that about that week, seeing my superheroes come to life in front of me was really magical and great experience overall. And when I came home, though, there was a package waiting for me the size of a television, and I rip it open, and it's a frame photograph. People could see it on it's my Facebook cover photo forever. It's my Twitter cover photo forever of me and the entire cast of X-Men. Yeah. And even better than that is the note from the chairman. Get this, for leadership and experience. It said, "Jim, thank you so much for sharing your superpowers with all of us. I know you've been searching for your superhero school ever since you were a child. Here's your class photograph." And I get goosebumps thinking about it. I call them truth bumps, but it was such a real, raw, rewarding experience for me. And that's how I got into, I realized, because it was just prior to that, I had my life-death experience, and it made me, and I saw that franchise do close to $1 billion. And, in the publishing industry, in this expert industry, to get on the New York Times or something, you need like 15,000 or maybe 20,000 copies sold. But there's a big difference between that and $1 billion, in entertainment. Education, empowerment tend to be here, but entertainment is like so many, floors up, and
that's where your value in that industry is just so profound.
And that's what made me interested, because you and I have this shared goal of impact, and I thought like, wow, if I really am going to do this, I need to understand pop culture, because growing up, I was like the least cool person I knew. So, but
I still am the least cool person.
Dude, I would challenge you for that title. But it's interesting because I don't know anything about, I didn't, music, everything that scales, music and film and television and video games and reality. So I shortly after that moved to California to really understand that, and started working with all the talent. And my goal really is that maybe somebody wouldn't go to the bookstore to buy, one of yours or my future books, but they listen to these musicians and these actors, and maybe when they say that learning is cool, or learning high performance, and they make it explicit, because that's usually their shared strategy. I believe that genius leaves clues, that if somebody is really successful at something, that they are doing certain things other people aren't. And one of the things they are doing is they're constant learners, and they hire people to help them be at their best. Just like singers, they have a voice coach. Businesses, they have a business coach or a financial coach. Athletes have personal trainers. And so I work with individuals to be their brain coach, to help them focus, to help them learn, to help them, be in flow so they can get the things done, to be able to catch up, keep up, get ahead.
It's such a privilege to see how far you have gone, and how much you have penetrated at all levels of society, from political to corporate to popular culture, all the way down to education. Being exposed to presidents, politicians, and CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world, you clearly have a very different worldview than most people. You've clearly seen and heard and had the privilege of experiencing a range of stuff. But I'd be curious to know, what's the one or two greatest pieces of advice that you've ever got from working with some of these incredible minds to the point where so, I'm going to take that one with me.
I feel you. I feel like we can learn something from everybody. And there are obviously common themes that genius does, in fact, leave clues, and genius can be learned and trained with deliberate practice and deep work. That being said, commonalities I've seen across the board, whether it's an Oprah or an Elon Musk, is constant learning, right? And none of these individuals necessarily, the people I respect are these outliers, that they didn't necessarily have all the resources, and they weren't given these things, that they worked for it, right? And so commonalities is they had a growth mindset, across the board. It's not fixed like our shoe size, that we know that our potential is dependent on the work that we're doing. Because I think it was Jim Rohn said this, what you practice in private, you're rewarded for in public. And so they're doing the work. For example, when I was with Will Smith, we were doing night shoots from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. as a superhero movie. And I was like, how do you everyone thinks this is so glamorous, but all you're doing is like waiting around. This is so boring. I was like, how do you get ready at 3 o'clock? And director says, let's go, let's shoot at 3 o'clock. And he was like, Jim, I don't have to get ready. I stay ready. I'm like, wow. Okay. So like, I believe that the life you live are the lessons you teach. And for me, I don't prepare. Number one, I trust that it's going to flow through me. Like, you mentioned, where you're a vessel for it. And it's there. It's, you believe it. But also when you do the work, I'm just sharing what I do, because I double down, because I all these disadvantages. I just teach what I do, and all I'm doing is documenting it on social media and my processes. But the other part of it that was interesting when I was with him was I talk a lot about these things about dominant questions, that I believe when we're thinking all the time, we're asking all these questions and we're answering these questions inside our mind, and there's only so many thoughts that we have. We have about 60, 70,000 thoughts a day, but the challenge is 95% of them are the same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before that. And that's why we're getting the same kind of results, because thoughts are things. But we tend to have certain thoughts or questions we ask more than others, and they are dominant. And so, for example, I have a friend, we went through an exercise. I found out her dominant question that she asks herself hundreds of times a day is, how do I get people to like me? And it's interesting, right? You don't know anything about this woman. You don't know her age, her ethnicity. You don't know what she does for a living. You don't know her physical. You don't know anything about her, but you know a lot about her. Like, if somebody obsessed about how do I get people to like me, and they ask that question of themselves, what do you think? What do you think her personality would be like?
I'd say a little bit needy, a little bit clingy, subservient, trying too hard. Says sorry a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, that's her mantra.
Yeah,
she's a martyr. Her personality molds depending on who she's spending time with.
Yeah,
she's a
chameleon.
She's a sycophant. She's always trying to please everybody else, and you know so much about her, and all you know is like one question she asks herself. And I always tell people that questions are the answer, that we all have a dominant question. Like for me, growing up as a kid with the broken brain, I would always look at people and saying, why are they so much better than I am at this? Like, how do I make this better? And I got obsessed about these ideas, because I was always coming from a place where I didn't have access to those things. And so I go through this, and I spent the entire day with Will on that set. And, his dominant question was, one of his dominant questions is, how do I make this moment even more magical? And I was like, wow, because questions are the answer. You start, like, people don't know this, but our brains are primarily a deletion device. At any given time, there's a billion stimulus we could be paying attention to.
Constantly filtering.
And so we're always we're trying to delete, and things get generalized and distorted, along the way. And so only certain things get in. And usually what gets in is the things we have questions about. They act like magnets pulling it in. Even when we read, most people, if you've ever read a page in a book, got to the end and forgot what you just read, usually it's because, and you go back and reread it and you still don't know what you just read, it's because usually you're not asking enough questions. Because if you did, you would say, oh, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer. And so his question was, how do I make this moment even more magical? And I noticed he lived it. In simple example, like that night at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was in Toronto and it was very, very cold. It was over the winter. And his family from West Philly, as his theme song goes, Fresh Prince song goes, is visiting him, and we're all outside, and it's nighttime, and it's cold, and we're covered in blankets. But he's bringing them all hot chocolate. He's helping them, like he's cracking jokes at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I know everyone knows he's tired, but he's bringing more magic to that moment because that's his focus. That's his question. And so I think that questions are the answer. We need to be able to dial into those questions more. And so when I'm working with high achievers, to answer your question, I would say they're lifelong learners who subscribe to a growth mindset. They also subscribe to a lot of grit. So I would say that's the second G for a mindset besides growth, meaning that, you know,
they can suffer.
Exactly. Will Smith will say that, he says this publicly, that if he's on a treadmill next to you at the gym, then, and you know, he's in that mode, he's either one of two things going to happen. Either he's going to, you know, he's going to win.
I'm going to die.
Or he's going to die. Exactly. Trying to do that. I remember years ago, I got a message. There was a big boxing match going on. It was a big one. It was Mayweather versus Pacquiao, and Sylvester Stallone messaged me, said, "Do you want to watch the boxing match at my place?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to watch it with Rocky. That's the most amazing thing ever."
Who doesn't, right?
And so I get to his home, and we're in the theater, and I'm sitting on a couch, and we're watching. It's me. To my left is Sly Stallone, and to his left is Arnold Schwarzenegger. I love it. If somebody took a picture of that couch, they'd be like, "Who photoshopped that Asian dude in that photo?" But after the boxing match happens, and afterwards, I remember, I think genius leaves clues, and I want to know everything from what people's perspective is, because I think those that's gold. And I asked Arnold, I was like, "What's, you know, what does it take to be a champion? You know, what's the difference?" Same question you just asked me, and he said, "Jim, the difference between a champion and an amateur is the champion is willing to push past the pain period." You know what I mean? Grit, getting through, you know, be able to persist. And even when you're building a muscle,
the reps don't stand till the pain does.
As you know, exactly. And most of the time, those are the painful ones that people don't want to do, but that's what gives us all the growth. Because while the beauty is in the butterfly, the growth happens in the cocoon. Like it develops its wings, its strength from the wings by trying to break out of the cocoon. So it has the strength, and the vitality to be able to soar. Exactly, to soar to new heights. So I would say that's a big commonality is growth mindset. They have an incredible amount of grit. And I would say two more G's. Commonality is for people successful. They're, for the most part, they tend to be a very, gratitude is a third G, meaning that
very grateful.
Yeah, I think everything has to build on gratitude, because
it really is a fundamental, like a universal principle when you think about what appreciation is as a substance, as a form. It's the manifest. It's the accumulation of more. It's the creation of more, and it's such an important quality when it comes to whether it be a relationship or wealth creation. The more we appreciate what we have, the more it fosters and creates more. And by virtue, the more we depreciate, the natural laws of atrophy apply. It's
my good friend. Her name is Lynn Twist. She took me to the Amazon rainforest back in 2010, and we actually came across an indigenous tribe. We were their first Western contact.
Holy shit!
And there was a huge exercise in gratitude for me. But she wrote a book called The Soul of Money, and she says what you appreciate appreciates. What you appreciate in life appreciates, meaning grows.
It does.
And a great thought experiment. I recommend everyone did, because we did like it's like a Thanksgiving episode on our podcast. Wow. And it was all about how gratitude rewires your nervous system for positivity, peace of mind, and prosperity. And the great thought experiment is, what if the only things in your life tomorrow were the things you expressed gratitude for today?
Yeah. What would you say thank you for?
Exactly. Yeah. And all the things. I mean, just simple things like your ability to even listen to this conversation right now. And if you want to feel truly wealthy, count all the things in your life you have that money can't buy, and come from that place. So gratitude, it seems like a commonality. And I would say the fourth element I've noticed with high achievers, besides a growth mindset and grit, and gratitude, is giving. I really do subscribe to the formula: you learn to earn to return. You know, the more you learn, the more you could earn, and the more you earn, the more you could return and give back. And I feel like that we shouldn't give to get. We give because it's who we are. That everything in nature has to grow or it dies, and everything in nature has to give back. Otherwise, it's eliminated. Right? Everything has to be able to serve a purpose, and you know that's why I really welcome the opportunity to collaborate with you. You know, at your events and us having this conversation, because I feel like that we're all here. I always look for competence, like 3 C's. I look for competence in relation, because I like to be around people who are world class and they're experts at what they do, because I like to learn. The second C is character, you know, because I feel like who you spend time with is who you become. And somebody could be really competent, but they might not have character or integrity. And that doesn't really serve also, because even when you think about your working relationships, you want somebody who could get the job done, but you also want somebody who's honest. And some people could have character but not have the competence. But then the third C I would say is consciousness, meaning that they know it's not just about themselves. They could go out there and make $1, but it's also good to make a difference also as well. And so those are things I look for.
It seems to me you've got a very good relationship with consciousness, very self-aware. I'm curious if there's any of that is rooted in any form of spirituality or religion, perhaps from where when you've grown up.
Yeah, my parents aren't super spiritual. We grew up going up to church. For me, my religion. I mean, I say my prayers and my intentions. My religion really is kindness, and it's so interesting. And I know people say that there's a difference between. I just want to. I have a pet peeve sometimes around certain words, where people use them interchangeably. Some people say that person's really nice, or that person's really kind, and I just want to sensitize everybody to there's a difference. Like when somebody says when they use the word nice, the person who's at the grocery store or that you meet there, they could be nice to you, but that doesn't mean that they care about you. And for me, nice is about people that because if kindness really is something that is a spiritual experience, nice says somebody who's, they could placate to you in the moment, but it doesn't mean that they have compassion or caring about you. But someone who's kind will go out of their way to be able to support you, right? And I feel like we know people's intention based on where they put their energy and their focus and their resources and their time into. And kindness, like sometimes I call people on their stuff pretty often because I want to challenge them, on their BS, their belief systems that they have, because I think a coach needs to do that. That good coach holds a certain standard for somebody and sees their genius maybe sometimes before that they do. And instead of being nice to them, telling what they want to hear, you tell people the truth. Like the truth is, all of us could be living a greater life than we are truly right now expressing. And that's just a truism that we don't even know what the current, limitations are. But, what we're doing is we're not necessarily demonstrating the highest version of ourselves. And my goal is to show people really what they're capable of. And hopefully that there's a ripple effect, because just like kindness, it's like a butterfly effect. A butterfly effect is saying that a butterfly flapping its wings here in Sydney create a tsunami of change across the globe, because we live in a world full of systems and it's very dynamic. And I'm saying that when we're kind to somebody as part of our daily practice, you don't know where that ripple effect stops, at all. But,
one of my favorite movies was Pay It Forward.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Something I do hear you talk about a lot is digital dementia. But I'm curious from your perspective if there's a big issue that we've got at play here. And digital dementia is just a symptom of a perhaps bigger cultural issue. What's your take on the whole addiction device dementia shift that we're seeing in our culture?
Yeah. I just did a masterclass with your team, and we recorded it, and maybe we could give a link for everyone to be able to watch it. But we go into how to overcome 4 of the biggest challenges that our technology is placing on us now, and it's holding us back in ways that you can't even calculate. And the 4 supervillains, if you were, are this digital overload, too much information, too little time.
Yep.
Because we're drowning information, but we're really starving for practical wisdom. And that's why I love content like this that we're creating. Second one, so that's why I teach people to learn faster and to read faster, and so that's very important nowadays to have that skill set. The second one, besides digital overload, is digital distraction, and this is where we live in a world full of app notifications, social media alerts, and every single like, share, comment, cat video gives you this dopamine flood that makes it very addictive, first of all. So we open up Instagram 100 or 150 times a day, depending on what you buy into, and we losing our sense of focus, and we can't even maintain a conversation sometimes with somebody because our mind is going everywhere because it's trained to our distraction muscles. So that's why we do very specific training around focus and concentration. But the 2 other supervillains, another one is digital depression. And this is on the rise where social media.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
I love that.
Theodore Roosevelt.
I love that so much. And that's the thing. Like, people are always comparing their life to this highly curated, filtered Instagram highlight trailer that other people are posting. And it's not always greener on the other side. You know, it's greener where you water it, certainly, but it's sometimes online and social media, it's greener because it's artificial turf. Because it's just, I spent so much time with people.
Dead grass with spray painted green.
Right. And because it's this world where you have to be careful what's real. And so
you subscribe to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so talking about greener on the other side, talking about, you know, green, if you're green with envy, it does steal your joy, and comparison is a big challenge. And we shouldn't be, and we know this, but we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to anybody else but who we were yesterday. You know, or we're comparing ourselves to the best version of ourselves, but it's not really productive because we're all on different paths and we're all on different timelines. So digital depression. But the last one, as you mentioned, is digital dementia. And I know I went through a lot of tactics in this masterclass that I did with your team about 10 ways of unlocking this
we'll post
incredible
a link
brain.
Below.
Yep, absolutely. The thing is, digital dementia is where we're highly reliant on technology, and it's doing more work for us than ever before. And while it's convenient, it also is in a way crippling, meaning that in your phone, you know, it has your to-dos, it has your schedules, it does simple math. I was out to dinner the other night and with 10 people, and 3 people, when the bill came, took out their phones to divide the bill by 10. You know, and that should be very simple math, but digital dementia is saying, hey, your brain is like a muscle. It's use it, as my shirt says, it's use it or lose it. And most of us aren't using it as much because we're dependent on technology to do the work for us. Autocorrect, right? Or GPS. They're not getting early detection of dementia, because if you're relying on GPS,
don't even know how to drive the shops anymore, like just because GPS takes me
exactly.
there.
It tells you where and when to turn. You're not realizing when you would have a memory lapse, so they're not getting early detection on dementia, because you're not going to doctors to get checked out because you're not realizing you would have an issue, because technology is a crutch for you. And it's the equivalent of, I don't know, elevators and Ubers, where we're not, you know, it's better, we know, to take the stairs, you know, but because we're relying on technology, we're not getting the physical exercise, and we're a little bit out of shape. We're a little bit out of shape mentally. And if you're relying on technology too much, that's digital dementia, is the loss we're getting in cognitive performance because we're dependent on our smart devices, and our smart devices are making us stupid. And I'm not saying that technology is not great. It allows us to connect. It allows us to share. It allows us to inspire and educate. But if technology is a tool for us to use, but if the tool, you know, if the technology is using us, then who becomes the tool in the equation, right? We become the tool. It's just like fire. Fire could cook your food or it could burn your house. It's neutral. It's how we apply it. So I think that we are over dependent on technology, and it's doing those things. It's making us overloaded. It's making us distracted. Like if people, and I talked about this at your event, if people pick up their phone the first hour of the day, they're doing themselves a disservice. And I know it's hard, but it's an addiction, and you need to be. An addiction is like when you're doing something you can't stop, and especially if it has negative consequences. And the research shows that, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you're fresh, you're clear, you're also very suggestible because you're in that relaxed state. If you pick up your phone, it's rewiring your brain for 2 things. It's rewiring your brain to be distracted, because every single time, again, you can scroll on forever. It's building your distraction muscles as opposed to your focus muscles. But the second thing it's doing, it's rewiring your brain to be reactive, which is almost as dangerous, because you can't be a successful entrepreneur or parent or achiever if you're just reacting to things. And if you're training your brain, like you check your phone first thing in the morning and you get a voicemail or text message, an email with bad news or what, it could derail your whole day. And then you're on the defense, and you're training your brain right up front to be in defense, fighting fires. My friend Brendan Burchard has this quote that says, "Your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life." I mean, just let that sink in. It's just like we're reacting as opposed to waking up fresh and having a vision for your day and say, hey, if I get these, this is what I do. I write down 3 things, new things that I want to achieve personally, and 3 things I want to do professionally that day. So instead of like a to-do list full of hundreds of things, I have that too, but I say, hey, if I want to win, begin with the end in mind, right? Like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I come back and somebody asks like, how was my day? And I said, I crushed it. What are the 3 things I had to achieve? Personally and professionally. And I focus on that, and I don't actually check my phone unless I get one of those 6 things done.
Yeah, right.
And then I can go into that mode, but I can't get derailed and be on the defense. And so limit the digital distraction.
So I guess with a little bit of a segue there into meditation, as is digital and technology, seems to be becoming quite popular and a lot more mainstream than what it was even 5-10 years ago. How are you seeing meditation as a supplement, for performance when it comes to memory?
Yeah, I'm really big advocate for meditation. We've done multiple podcast episodes on this subject. Everybody has their different version of meditation and what it looks to them. For me, I meditate a minimum of twice a day, 20 minutes each.
So you do like a transcendental style of meditation, Vedic?
So I have my own process because, over years, of doing this, I think everyone has to find what works for them. When I get on, sometimes when I fly, I will do it, in addition to the, morning and evening meditations that I do, I'll do it in the beginning of takeoff and, and then also on landing, descent, because it was interesting. I was having this conversation with Emily Fletcher, who wrote a book called Stress Less, Accomplish More. And she has a 3-phase we talked about on my show. It was 3 M's: mindfulness, meditation, and manifestation. And she says she's clearing up confusion that a lot of the apps out there, the Calm and the Headspace, they're not meditation apps as much as they are mindfulness. And mindfulness is a process of getting out of stress in the moment, getting out of current moment stress. But she defines meditation when, you go through this process as actually clearing past historical stress and trauma out, and giving your body, your nervous system energy to be able to heal those kind of things that happened in the past. And then once you're clear, then you go through a process of manifesting your day, taking a couple minutes and visualizing and feeling and thinking and feeling what you want and then that day. But I find that it's very important in a world of fight or flight, of where we're always in this sympathetic kind of mode, that we need to get into that parasympathetic rest and digest, recover space. And if you don't schedule it in your calendar, it's not going to happen. Most people do it, as a default. But I would say that 3 questions that I ask myself, we're talking about dominant questions to take knowledge and turn it into actual power, that I ask relentlessly. Number 1 is, how can I use this? So I would, listen to this episode again and ask yourself, how can I use this? And write down all your answers. Number 2 is, why must I use this? Because a lot of people know what to do, but they don't do what they know, because common sense is not common practice. And so I would go to the why. Why must I use this? And what are all the benefits and rewards? Because reasons reap results. And then the 3rd question I would ask consistently and relentlessly is, when will I use this? Because if it's not, the number 1 productivity performance tool we have is our phones. It's our calendars. And so what are you going to do? If you don't schedule your meditations and write it down and treat that like an appointment with your investor or your client or a doctor, people tend not to schedule their personal growth and performance practice time. So I would say do that also. But the highest achievers, they meditate. Even, the people I mentioned, Oprah, Hugh Jackman, they're avid meditators, because you have to disconnect to reconnect. And schedule that white space for yourself where you can be creative. Even walking meditations, Steve Jobs is very known for not doing sit-down meetings in boardrooms, and in conference rooms, would go for walking meetings, because being out in nature helps you it's been proven, when you're walking and out in nature, you're more creative. It supports divergent thinking, problem solving.
Jim, this has been an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor. You've been on my radar now for so long. So going from being a student with a brain injury, to feeling like I got an enormous amount of value, to the ever slow process of getting to know you even better, and having you here, this has been phenomenal, mate. Thank you so much. Before we go, though, we do have a link that you guys can get. If you guys want to check out the masterclass that Jim did for our clients. Now, I should point out, this was actually done as an exclusive masterclass specifically for our VIP clients. Now, so this normally wouldn't be released to the general public, but we're doing something a little bit special here. So if you go to quickbrain.com/Kerwin, Kerwin. For a limited time, we're going to give you guys access to that. So you're going to be able to go through that entire masterclass that our high-end VIP clients who pay us ridiculous sums of money have been able to get access to. This would normally be a paid program, but for a limited time, you guys can access that for free and check it out. And I think you'll get an enormous amount of value.
Thank you. Yeah, people my last name is spelled Kwik, Kwik. It's my real last name. It's
Kwik Brain.
I didn't change it to do what I do. It's my father's name, my grandfather's name.
That was actually one question I forgot to write down. Jim Kwik. That is, it's legit.
I had to be a runner back in school. It's a lot of pressure when it says Kwik right on your shirt. And
no kidding.
I have to be careful of speeding because you're not going to talk your way out of that speeding ticket when it says Kwik right on your shirt.
But again, when you look at this from a symbolic perspective, there's a lot of meaning in that. It's like the universe spoke when your name was given.
It did. Quick. So you go to quickbrain.com, KWKbrain.com /Kerwin, and you can get access to that special masterclass. And then I talk about 10 keys for unlocking what I call your quick brain. I talk about morning rituals, some of the things I do every single morning to activate that. We talked about with your team how to remember names. We talked about how to overcome information overload and focus in a world full of distraction. I mean, it is an
absolute ball terror. Yeah. It is fantastic. Fantastic.
Amazing.
Jim,
and then can I challenge everyone to
please?
Do something?
Yeah, of course.
I challenge everybody because I feel like if we could have a conversation, things sometimes could change, some things not. So I challenge everybody to take knowledge and turn it into action. That I would challenge everyone to take a screenshot of this episode or this video or this form or maybe a video of yourself. Tag Kerwin, tag myself. I'm at Jim Kwik, KWIK on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But tag us in it and share your big aha. Ooh. I feel like that one of the ways of learning faster is to teach somebody else. When we teach, we get to learn things twice. And even when you go through Kerwin's material, my material, and you learn with the intention of talking and giving a presentation on it or teaching somebody else on your team or your family member, then you're going to learn it better. You're going to have better focus. You're going to take better notes. You're going to ask better questions. And so I would say always learn with the intent of teaching and paying it forward. And so my challenge is screenshot it, tag us both so we see it, and share your big aha. What's one thing you got out of this conversation or one thing you're going to do after it, and post it. And people know me that follow me on Instagram and so on, that I repost some of my favorites out there, and I give some of my favorite books out because I believe leaders are readers. That if somebody has decades, I went from the person who couldn't read to somebody who reads almost a book a day. For 4.5 years, I read a book a day. But the reason why is because somebody has decades of experience and they put it into a book, and you could sit down and read it in a few days. You could download decades into days. In the masterclass that we're giving away for free, we actually talk about speed reading and such, and how you could actually read, because and read for retention. My clients are some of the top doctors in the world. You don't want your doctor to get the gist of what she's reading, so we really retain it. But I would encourage everyone to read more and schedule that every single day also. But post your big ahas, and I'll reward people that way. And thank you also for what you do. I just have to honor you because most people don't realize what goes on behind the scenes of the impact that people are making and the sleepless nights. And so thank you for the cape that you wear, you and your team, because I feel like this is what the world needs. More people who discover and are developing other people's superpowers. And just having superpowers doesn't make you a superhero, though. You have to use those powers for good, and I think all of us have this ability to be unstoppable, that your life is like an egg, that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins. And great things tend to begin on the inside. And I believe everybody who's listening to this, especially if you're still listening to this, that you have greatness inside of you. You have genius inside of you. And when
you have superpowers inside of you. You really do.
Absolutely. So that's the reason why, even with the superhero school, that's why, I do our podcast, 15-minute show teaching people how to do this. It's like our superhero university.
How good would it be if we actually started to teach our kids this in schools? And because that's one thing I do with my son Noah. Like, he's literally convinced that I'm a superhero. Like, he thinks his dad is a legit, and I've convinced him that he's a superhero as well.
Yeah.
And I think, imagine the impact that we could have on the next generation if we literally started empowering our kids with the ability to think they have powers that can affect the world.
And they do. And I really do believe that our superpowers are a unique story and are unique, because nobody could be you better than you. And I also think our other superpower is our mind. This science has not found anything more complex than this 3-pound matter between our ears called our brain, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual. But our life is a reflection of our brain, and if you want to change your life, you have to change your brain. If you want to change your world,
Life is like the Greatest American Hero. Do you remember that show?
Yeah, I do.
I love that show. And for those who remember what that show is, it shows how old you are.
I know.
But about the guy driving through the desert, gets beamed up into this spaceship, and they give him this briefcase with a superhero suit inside and a user's manual. And he gets beamed back down to Earth. And as he's walking back to his car in the middle of the desert, the user's manual falls out. And he gets in the car, gets home, puts on his Superman uniform, and he's like, wow, I've got the Superman uniform, but there's no instructions. And I love the metaphor because he literally flies through the roof, crashes into buildings. Yeah. And the whole metaphor is we've all been given the super suit. We have this biological superpower.
We do.
No one gave us a user's manual. And I believe that the game is just remember.
Yeah.
You've got this.
Exactly.
Remember.
I think the ultimate quest that we're all on together is to realize, to reveal, to express our full potential.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to start.
It's great to have you here, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Wow. This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business.
There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you get to see all of these interviews in the flesh. Share this podcast with your friends and drop me a review on iTunes. I would love to hear what you guys think, and also let you know that your comments help make sure that we keep producing killer content just like this. And if you'd like to stay up to date with all of my movements, upcoming podcasts, events, and much more, please jump onto the website kerwinray.com, and also check us out on all social media on the handle @KerwinRay. Thanks for joining us.